Welcome everyone. I'm Lynn Rolland, she/her co-chair of the Purple Network here at CUH, which is for people with visible, invisible disabilities and those with physical, mental health conditions. We promote equality and inclusion for everyone in the CUH. You do not have to have a disability to be involved in our network, and we welcome support from everyone. In December, we celebrated Disability History Month by lighting up our CUH chimney purple for the World Disability Day. Before I introduce Sam, I'd just like to mention there will be a Q&A at the end of this webinar, and you can add anything throughout using the Q&A function. I would very much like to welcome Sam Wilkinson, business psychologist, with a webinar on chronically working, turn page, about how people can work in partnership to support both individual and organisational needs. This webinar is being recorded to watch afterwards and will be available on the CUH staff Facebook page. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so before I introduce who I am and what chronically working is, I thought we could just do a little quiz. So in the Q&A option at the bottom, if you want to put your answers, it'll be A, B, C or D, and then we can see how much you know already about chronic illness and disability. So roughly how many disabled people are there in the UK? Is it A, 3 million people, B, 7 million people, C, 11 million people, or D, 14 million people? I'm seeing lots of C's, one D, or a couple of D's. So it's D, 14 million people. What percentage of people with a disability do not use a wheelchair or any other visible aid? A, 50%, B, 65%, C, 74%, or D, 90%? Got a bit of a mixture for this one. Lots of C's. And that's right, so it's C, 74%. What percentage of disabled people were born with their disabilities or conditions? A, 17%, B, 21%, C, 33%, or D, 46%? Again, it's a bit of a mixed one, but I think A's and B's maybe, a few C's. It's A, 17%. How many working age people in the UK have a disability or chronic health condition, which is what percent of the working age population? A, 1.9 million, which is 5%, B, 3.8 million, which is 10%, C, 5.8 million, which is 14%, or D, 7.7 million. What everyone's saying. C, D, C. It's D, 7.7 million, 19%. What percentage of chronic illnesses are invisible? A, 36%, B, 56%, C, 76%, or D, 96%? Lots of C's. And it's actually D, 96% of chronic illnesses are invisible. And it is estimated that by 2030, what percentage of the working age population in the UK will have at least one chronic health condition? And this was before COVID, so this doesn't include long COVID. Again, a bit of a mixture of responses. And it's actually D, 40%. So after those statistics, I'm sure some of you are probably aware and realise that those were the shocking truth to chronic illness, and especially in the workplace. But some of you might be a bit shocked by some of those statistics, and we can talk about that maybe in the Q&A at the end. But why did I set up Chronically Working, and what is it? So Chronically Working was something I set up after having my little boy, and deciding that I wanted to do something with my business psychology to help other people with chronic illness and disability in the workplace. And this is because when I was only 21 and at the start of my career, I was told by my manager that you can't get promoted, your health is too unpredictable. And I feel like this was a real turning point for me, and I could have easily stopped working, given up. I'd just done my degree, I wanted to do my master's, and I could have just said, you know what, I'll just leave it at this and just continue in the job I was in. But actually I used it to create a bit of a fire in my belly and push for what I wanted to get out of life, and that was to be a business psychologist. And now 10 years down the line, I'm helping other people, which is great. So Chronically Working, you can follow me on social media. I've already done a workshop with your trust, and I do these workshops with other trusts and webinars and things. I also do some consulting, and there's a community as well online that you can join and just talk to other people that are also working with a chronic health condition or invisible disability. So what's classed as a disability? On paper, the Equality Act 2010 states that a person has a disability if they have a physical or mental impairment, and that impairment has a substantial and long-term effect on their ability to perform normal day-to-day activities. So by long-term, they mean that it's going to affect you for at least a year. I think this slide now really opens people's eyes to how much is actually included under the disability umbrella, and what's actually included as a disability. So there's sensory impairments, which include sight loss and hearing loss, progressive conditions such as motor neuron disease, injuries such as brain injury. Again, these are all just some examples. There are hundreds of examples that I could include, but we've only got an hour. So I'm just including some top line ones. Mental health conditions such as bipolar and depression, autoimmune conditions such as type 1 diabetes and inflammatory bowel disease, physical disabilities such as cerebral palsy, impairments with fluctuating or recurring effects such as epilepsy, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, and developmental and learning disabilities such as autism and Asperger's. So luckily, I don't get asked this very often, but I just like to include why employ and support disabled and chronically working employees anyway. But luckily, most employers do want to support and employ these employees. But if anyone wants to ask why, I've got many answers, and these include that by employing and supporting your chronically working and disabled employees, it increases the number of high quality applicants available to you in your organisation. I think people often forget that disabled people are the largest minority group, and a group that often get overlooked. It drives employee motivation and has an impact on sales and opportunities and supports business objectives. Diverse businesses and teams are more successful. Representation and inclusion reflect a wider range of experiences and viewpoints, which leads to better design and development of products and services. And obviously in the NHS, if you've got a nurse, for example, I had a nurse that has got Crohn's disease like me, and she just understood everything I wanted and needed while I was in hospital. And that just was amazing for me. So in your field especially, it's really important that you've got staff that reflect your diverse patients. It also creates a workforce that reflects the diverse range of customers you want to reach. Obviously, this isn't as reflective with the NHS, but this is around the purple pound. And it's estimated that 249 billion annually and globally is held by the disabled people. It can help minimise the cost of staff turnover and loss of knowledge. So if you don't support these employees and they decide to leave, you're going to have to not only have the cost of rehiring, you're also losing that knowledge that they have. I think this is a really important one, and something that keeps cropping up in a lot of the research I do around business anyway, not just in the chronic illness space, but millennials and future generations are really starting to look into what organisations do and how they treat their employees. So, for example, going on Glassdoor, if you were going to get a job with say, your trust, they could easily go on to Glassdoor and see how people are treated, and especially how people with chronic illnesses and disability are treated. And people actually care about that now, and won't want to work for people that don't support these minority groups. The legal side of things, so businesses that overlook diverse groups obviously risk discrimination. And finally, because it's the right thing to do, disability and illness is unpredictable and can happen to anyone at any point in their lives. And I think one of the statistics at the start really shows that not many people are born with their chronic illnesses or disabilities. I didn't get my first condition until I was 21. I've got a handful now that I seem to get a new one each year. But it just shows that no one knows what's around the corner. And I think COVID has really highlighted that to us as well. And the Business Disability Forum, their research shows that 90% of the global businesses involved in that research just stated that it's the right thing to do. Disability inclusion needs to be done at a global level. So I'm going to talk now about some top tips for supporting your employees, team members and colleagues with hidden disabilities. And the first of these is communication. So in order for there to be a partnership between someone with a chronic illness and disability and their manager, their employer, it's really important that communication is one of the main things that we focus on. And it might sound simple, but actually when I've worked with many people with chronic illnesses or worked with their managers in particular, they often don't keep each other informed. And I think it's really easy to think that once you've spoken about a chronic illness or disability that you know it all then, but actually how I felt last week isn't the same as how I feel this week, and it won't be the same as how I feel next week. So something that really worked for me and has helped other people that I've worked one-to-one with is having these informal weekly check-ins, because conditions do fluctuate and change. For example, I was in hospital only last week, really, really poorly. I still feel quite poorly now, but that just shows how 1 minute you can be really poorly in hospital, rushed into A&E, and the next can look perfectly fine. So it's really important to have those informal check-ins just to check that your employee is actually okay. And because of them 96% of chronic illnesses being invisible, it is hard to know exactly what is going on, and having that two-way communication and that informal level of communication can really help your employee feel able to speak up about what's going on. Share the bigger picture. So an example I use for this is when I got promoted into a role before I became self-employed. I felt like my manager didn't understand. He was very much like, I need you here to do this, I need you here to do that. And I was like, well, can I not work from home the days that I'm struggling and the days I don't have any face-to-face meetings? Can I work from home and kind of save some energy? And he didn't understand how much that would mean to me in terms of how much it can drain my energy just commuting. So until I shared that bigger picture to him, and until he shared the bigger picture to me that actually it was coming from above, that the team needed to be visible at all times, we just both didn't understand each other. So until we had that bigger picture kind of on the table of what we both want and need, we were kind of at loggerheads and we didn't understand each other. And once we had spoken about this, we actually made it so that I could work from home 1 day a week, and we communicated that with the wider team, and everyone understood that day I just wouldn't be in, so no meetings would be scheduled with me. It would just be like my admin day kind of thing, where I just get my head down and get my work done. And yeah, so it was a bit of the informal weekly check-ins, the communication and showing that bigger picture, and also being open and honest with each other. I think that is a really important one. You really need to be able to tell your manager, and for your manager to tell you exactly like what is needed, get it all on the table. And a good way to thinking about a chronically ill person, employee, to talk to have this communication with their manager. If you look up the spoon theory, that's a really great way to explain fatigue to your manager. And maybe as a manager, it's a great way to kind of understand what fatigue is like for people with chronic illnesses. Create a safe space for employees to speak up. I think I've kind of covered that as well, but having that ability to say, look, I don't feel great today. This is where I'm at, or look, I've got a really rough week ahead with appointments and things. Just having that safe space to be honest, rather than holding it all back. And I think it's really important that, especially since COVID, with a lot of people working from home, it's easy to kind of forget about the person at home, or to not on purpose, but if they're the only person that's on the Zoom meeting and the rest of you are all in a room, it might feel a bit isolating for the person working at home. So maybe, for example, those meetings, you could all do a Zoom together. Just notes, I've got Q&A. Okay, so the spoon theory, someone's just asked what it is. So basically, it's a great way of describing how people struggle with fatigue. So for example, someone without a chronic illness or disability that doesn't struggle with fatigue, they might have unlimited amounts of energy. They can get up in the morning, have a shower, make themselves a breakfast, do some housework, and then go to work, commute to work, do their work 9 to 5, even more hours, commute back, maybe even go to the gym, cook themselves dinner, maybe socialize. They can do all these things because they've got unlimited amounts of energy. Someone with a chronic illness or disability, which one of the symptoms might be fatigue, may only have a limited amount of energy. So one way of explaining that limited amount of energy is with the spoon theory. And the idea is that you've got 10 spoons to use within 10 spoons to last you a day. So that's 10 spoons of energy. Getting up and out of bed for most people is fine, like they don't struggle with that. But for someone with a chronic illness or disability, like getting up and getting ready and getting out of bed may take up 1 or 2 spoons, because like it's just thinking about it now, I find it draining to like think, okay, I've got to get up. So that then you've lost a few spoons just getting up and getting ready for work. They don't even have time to make themselves breakfast or even the energy to do that. So if they were to do that, they might lose more spoons, but they have to keep those spoons for getting to work. So commuting to work, that might be a few more spoons. They might have a few face-to-face meetings. And again, for someone without fatigue, that might just come natural. It might be just their part of their day-to-day life, but someone with fatigue, they might find that really tiring to be that switched on constantly in meetings, or even if they were running a workshop and things. So again, that might lose a few spoons. So basically, by the end of the day, they might not have any spoons left. And so at the end of the work day, by the time they finish work and have got home and done dinner, they might even be in minus spoons. So it's about being able to kind of balance those spoons throughout your day, and saving spoons for when you need them, I guess. But if anyone's got any more questions on that, I'm happy to talk about it further at the end. So the second top tip is knowledge. And it might sound cheesy, but I do think knowledge is power. And as an employer or a manager, for someone with a chronic illness or disability, there's ways that you can educate yourself. So research your your employee's chronic illness or disability. There is so much online now. And actually almost every condition or disability has an associated charity. And this is a great place to find information. In fact, I know a lot of charities now actually have a whole section around employment and how having that condition might affect the way they need to be treated at work. For example, as I said, I've got Crohn's disease, and on our Crohn's and colitis charity's website, there's things that you can print off and give to your manager, which kind of explains why they might be going to the toilet so often. It's not that they're skiving in the toilet, it's actually that they've got inflammatory bowel disease and they have to go to the toilet a lot more than a normal person might have to go. So that is, again, a great way of getting this information and kind of building that knowledge up about what is it that your employee is actually facing. And again, something that I found that my last employer did, which was really great, is that they got involved in these awareness days. And we'd have like a cake sale, or we'd wear purple when it was the kind of the main day to wear purple, and just showing that little bit of support and like creating like a community around it just really helped me feel able to talk about my condition more, because it was almost like they knew about it because of these awareness days. So no one was assuming things, and they could literally just Google what is Crohn's disease and what does that mean. So flexibility and reasonable adjustments. So the Equality Act recognises that achieving equality for disabled people may mean changing the way that employment is structured. This could be removing physical barriers or providing extra support for a disabled worker or applicant. So this is what it says around this. Employers have a duty to take steps to remove, reduce, or prevent the obstacles individuals face as a disabled worker or job applicant, where it's reasonable to do so. However, the employer only has to make reasonable adjustments where they are aware or should reasonably be aware that you have a disability. And I'm going to talk about this in a bit when I talk about tips for employees with chronic illness and disability around disclosure and why that is actually so important. But I think something that people always feel a bit anxious about when I talk about these reasonable adjustments, flexible working options, is that they're going to be expensive or really radical ideas that people are going to have. But actually, a lot of them are either cheap or free solutions. And there are these funded schemes, government funded schemes, that can help. Sorry, I'm just going to read the Q&A just to check that we're not. What other conditions fall into autoimmune disease? Glandular fever, it has had a long time. So I'm not sure if it would come under autoimmune disease, but glandular fever, if it's affecting you after a year's time, then it is, and it's having an adverse effect on your life, then it would come under the disability umbrella somewhere. I'm just not medically, I'm not a medical professional, so I wouldn't know which one that would come under, but it might be worth talking to someone about that, because if it is affecting you after a year's time, then yes, it is classed as a long-term condition. But back to this around the flexible working options, I think a lot of people assume it's going to cost something expensive, or that they're going to want. For example, I had someone message me the other day and say, Sam, I'm looking for some advice. I'd like to put in this reasonable adjustment request at my workplace. I work 5 days a week. I'd like to work 4 days instead, but get paid for 5 days. And I was like, oh, okay. Are you going to work the 5 days worth of hours across the 4 days instead? And he was like, no, I just want to work 4 days, but get paid for 5 days. And I had to explain that, as lovely as that would be, that is just not a reasonable adjustment. However, I do know people who work for other organisations that have said, I'd like to work 4 days, but actually work more hours over those 4 days, just so I've got a day to do all of my hospital appointments, get my bloods done. Because something I do talk about is that if you've got a chronic illness and you're only given, say, 25 days holiday a year, and you're expected to use those holiday days to go to hospital appointments, you've almost lost those holidays within half a year if you've got a few chronic illnesses. For example, so I've got about 6 different consultants that like to see me. So if they all want to see me, that's 6 of my holiday days gone. All of those want multiple blood tests throughout the year. Near enough all of them want some kind of scan or camera or x-ray, something done. I tend to have like one of those at least once a month. Over the last 3 weeks, I've had 2 cameras, a CT scan and 2 ultrasounds. So if that was a day's holiday, I've already lost those 5 days as well. So it's just another flexible working adjustment that might be reasonable, is having something in place where they can build up their hours and then go and take these appointments without having to take a whole day off, day's holiday, because really day's holiday should be kept for rest, having a holiday and things like that. So that's just an idea around flexible working as well. And yeah, most importantly, it costs more to rehire than it does to make adjustments to retain an employee who becomes disabled. Because something I'm seeing a lot, especially when I'm working with different NHS trusts, is that long COVID is very real, and people are really struggling now with their health since getting COVID. But it is more costly. It would be more costly to find someone new and to retrain. It's just about trying to make adjustments for these employees. But I will talk about it further in a bit, around when we say top tips for the employee. But I do think that there comes to a point where if there's no reasonable adjustments that can actually help you, sometimes it comes down to having to have a think and realise that you might have to change what it is you do now. I've spoke about this in my workshop, which I've done with you guys before, that I really wanted to be a business psychologist in London. That was just my dream. I wanted to kind of work in London, work for one of the big top business psychologist organisations. And I even had interviews with them last summer before choosing to go self-employed. But then when they were telling me, okay, so you'll be working like 8 till 6, and then you'll have to go abroad often and things like this, as much as I really want to do that, I kind of realised that I can't work those hours anymore. My body just won't let me. And it's kind of having to think, even with adjustments in place, it probably won't help me anymore, and I need more adjustments than reasonable, I guess. So before we move on to top tips for working with managing your hidden disabilities, is there any more questions around how to support the managers and what anything around that? I know that I've answered a few of the questions that came up. I'll carry on for now then, unless we've got any more that pop up. Okay, so top tips for working with managing your hidden disabilities. And the first is around disclosure and communication, which I think is one of the biggest topics that crop up when I do these webinars and workshops. So at the end of the day, it is up to you if you disclose and communicate about your chronic illness or disability. No one can make you do that. No one can force you. It is up to you. I have a lot of people say to me, would you disclose it on a application form when you're applying for a job, or would you disclose it once you've got the job? Would you disclose it once you've been in the job a few months? I don't think there's any right answer. I think that comes down to what you feel most comfortable with. out of my experience, I've always felt that an employer doesn't need to know about my chronic illness at application stage when they've never even met me. I think it should be fair, and I think I should be viewed as the same as the next person. So I personally don't disclose my condition at that stage. When I do disclose my condition is once I've got the job or once I'm at an interview where I feel comfortable and able to talk about it. And that is because if I don't disclose my condition and tell my manager about the things I face because of my conditions and disabilities, then they can't help me. And I think that's a really big point that another thing that people often message me saying, my manager just won't let me have this day off to go to this appointment. My manager doesn't listen to me. My manager doesn't understand. And then I'll say, okay, so do they know what it is that you've got to go to this appointment for? Do they actually know what your chronic illness is and what you face? Oh no, I've never told them. So unless you've told them, they can't understand. They can't help you. They can't put in these reasonable adjustments in place. So it is a huge topic where, yes, it is up to you if you want to disclose and communicate about your chronic illness or disability. But at the same time, what people don't know, they can't help you with. And also it is around being protected by the Equality Act. So if you were to be in my workshop, I talk a lot around discrimination. If you're discriminated against and you've declared your chronic illness and they know about it and they are discriminating you because of that, you would likely be protected by the Equality Act. However, if you never told them about it, there's blurry lines. So again, it is about making sure that you are protected by these things that are in place. And if you have chosen to disclose, it's always good to educate and make your manager aware of the full implications of how this will affect your daily work. So without that input and education, they may have a false picture in their head of what that disability means, or they may have some preconceptions of what that looks like. A good example of this is me and my mum both have Crohn's disease, but we both have Crohn's disease in very different ways. My mum has a stoma bag. I don't have a stoma bag. Hers doesn't cause her any pain, so she doesn't have to take any painkillers. Mine causes me an immense amount of pain. I have to take quite strong painkillers at times. So if we went to our managers and told them that we've got Crohn's disease, what my mum needs, for example, as in a disabled toilet, she needs to be able to rush out of work if she needs to because of her stoma bag has leaked or has burst or come off or anything, and I might need to work from home because I need to take painkillers, which means I can't drive. So we are very different in what we need, even though it's the same condition. So I think it's really important that you kind of talk to your manager, and this is where it comes down to communication again. Talk to your manager about how your condition shows and what your personal things are that your condition, your symptoms are, and how they can actually help you. And because almost everyone will say, and something that is always said to me, oh yeah, I've got a friend that's got IBS, and I'm like, oh, this isn't IBS, this is Crohn's disease. It's a bit different, but there's always going to be that misconception unless you actually tell people. I'm going to come to the questions in a moment. You may also wish to equip your employer with a new vocabulary around your disability or specify language you prefer to be used by colleagues in relation to it. Again, this might be something that you feel quite strongly about, and you might want certain things to be put in place so that you do feel that they're talking to you in the right way about these things. And something that I know your trust does, and I have heard of other trusts and other organisations that they do this as well, all called different things, is the purple passport. So you could talk to your manager about this purple passport and how this will help you with your career. But basically, once you've disclosed your condition, you won't need to keep disclosing that condition to other managers as you progress or change roles within the trust. It means that that kind of stays with you, so you don't have to go through the kind of emotions of having to disclose this again and again. Right. Yeah, safety must be substantial consideration when thinking of disclosing, and that's why it's really important as a manager and as an employer to make sure that your employees feel safe enough to do that, because unfortunately some people don't feel safe enough or able to disclose this. And then my question would possibly be, is that the right team to be in, or could you go and talk to someone else about that? Could you go to occupational health maybe, or talk to HR, or even talk to organisations like within your trust like this that could help you? What happens if a condition is discussed with a manager and the online training provided by the employer is then passed on by the employee, but the manager nor the employees make an effort to look at training? Who's responsible there? Trying the best training. I don't quite understand that question. So basically about the workplace training. We'll come back to that question because I might just need to think about that in terms of like your trust specifically, maybe. Oh, Katrina, I think is going to answer that.
Should we come back to that at the end, Sam?
Yeah, that'd be
let
great.
you carry on, and we'll do Q&A at the end.
Thank you. Okay, so top tips, number 2 is asking for reasonable adjustments. So if you have disclosed your condition and you've made that step to do that, you're entitled to ask for some reasonable adjustments. And as I said, these have to be reasonable. They can't be like what my message, the person on my messenger asked me and said, can I get paid for 5 days and just work 4? That's just not reasonable for anyone, let alone people with disabilities. You don't get that special treatment, unfortunately. But these may not be possible for all jobs, and I think it's really important that you talk to your manager, talk to occupational health, and discuss these as kind of like a group rather than just thinking, okay, I know what's going to help me. Discuss these because actually they might not work for the type of role you do. They might not work. For example, another example which would really relate to your trust and kind of a lot of your roles would be, I've got a close friend who's a nurse and she has a condition which is lifelong and which is really hard to deal with every day. And one of the main symptoms of that is fatigue. And she used to work 12-hour shifts and was fine up until she was in her mid-20s, and then she got this condition's lupus. And she just couldn't do it anymore. And they did try some reasonable adjustments. I think they tried like doing half shifts and things. I think they tried just doing day shifts rather than night shifts. There were things they tried, but nothing was going to help her work to the same ability as she could before she got lupus. So in the end, she decided to talk to occupational health, talk to a manager, and actually there was a job that came up in a research department within the trust, which she was perfect for and actually loves her job now. But it means that she can work from home some days. It means that she can work kind of set hours. She hasn't got to work these 12-hour shifts. So sometimes there are adjustments that can be put in place if you're even an office role within the trust, and maybe you can work from home a day or two or have some flexibility on your start and finish times. That might help. But if you're in a role that none of these adjustments can really be put in place, sometimes it's best to kind of talk to your manager, talk to occupational health, and just see if there's anything else out there that might be a bit more suitable now for you. But if you can have adjustments, some of these adjustments which might help include flexible start and finish times. This is a big one. A lot of people with chronic health conditions have to take some quite heavy medications, and this was something that I had to put in place. This was my main reasonable adjustment. So I take a tablet on an evening for pain, but it can make me a bit drowsy in the morning. So I would go into work at 10 rather than 9, just because at 9 o'clock I wouldn't be focused until 10 o'clock. But by 10 o'clock I was much more switched on. actually I'd work till 6 rather than 5, and I'd found that having that time from 5 till 6 when everyone else had gone home was again just a really good time for me to get my head down and get things done. So it was reasonable in the fact that I was working the same amount of hours. It was just flexible to suit me and kind of my symptoms and around medication things. Remote working, again, this isn't possible for all roles, but if it is possible, sometimes people find that just having one day to work from home really makes that difference in terms of like keeping their spoons down, or it might be that they can feel that they're more comfortable at home. For instance, having IBD, having my toilet in the next room just makes me feel so much more at ease, things like that. So that's where remote working might help. Job sharing, reduced hours, again, this might be if the above doesn't help or can't help, is that an option that could be put in place? But again, obviously your pay would change with that. Disability leave policy, this is something I think I'm seeing a lot of organisations consider. It's basically that if you're off with your condition because it's flared up, that wouldn't count as a sickness absence, like if you had a sickness bug, a chest infection, things that the majority of people do get. It would be counted as a disability related absence instead, so you don't get penalised for that. And something else that I found in my previous research is that people with chronic illness and disability really benefited from communicating with their team as to why they have these reasonable adjustments in place, just to avoid those speculations and people thinking, oh, they're getting special treatment. But again, this comes down to the employee's choice. It's all down to them. If they want to communicate why they have these reasonable adjustments in place, they can. If they don't want to, they don't have to. But something I found personally was when I was coming in at 10 o'clock in the morning, when everyone else was starting at 9, I explained why it was. I just said that I'm much better at working from 10 till 6. I explained that when everyone else goes home at 5 or to the pub at 5, I'm still here till 6. It doesn't mean that I'm working less hours. And then they were like, oh, actually, even if we had the choice, we wouldn't come in later anyway, because we want to leave earlier. And actually, our team then had the option to work from 8 till 4, which a lot of people decided to do as well. So sometimes just talking about these things can eliminate that, oh, she's getting the special treatment, and just make them see, actually, no, you can keep your special treatment. I'd actually rather have what's in place anyway. And finally, something that I just find really helpful for me is to plan my work week in advance and reduce that unnecessary energy use where you can, obviously. And some ways you can do this is talking to your manager about how you feel every week, as I said, having that informal check-ins because conditions do fluctuate. So having that check-in on a Monday and saying, you know what, actually, I've had a rough weekend, I'm not feeling great. I'm not doing any face-to-face meetings tomorrow. Do you mind if I just work from home tomorrow and just rest as well as work? Doing Teams and Zoom meetings rather than face-to-face meetings, that can really save energy, rather than walking all the way across to someone else's office or see them. Do it on Zoom instead. Working from home when possible, and remembering to plan in regular breaks. I think that's really important. Something that, even especially when you work from home, I think it's really easy just to sit here and work all day and then finish and have your dinner, but actually you need to have regular breaks. Just get up and walk around and have a drink as well. And most importantly, I think it's to know your own limits. For example, I know that after I've got a day full of webinars, meetings today, I know tomorrow I'm going to be absolutely zapped. So I have nothing in my diary tomorrow. I have loads that I need to get done, but it's all going to be at my own pace. And I know I'm very lucky at being self-employed to do that. But even when I was employed, it was thinking about, okay, I've got a really busy work event on this week. Next week, I'm probably going to need some time and planning that ahead. So that is me done. I hope it's been helpful. And if you do have any further questions after this or want to connect, you can email me at sam@chronicallyworking.com or find me on LinkedIn and social media. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam. That has been brilliant, brilliant webinar. Loads to take in. I'm always struck by that statistic of, by 2030, in 8 years' time, 40% of people will have some kind of disability or chronic illness or health condition. And if that's not us now, it might well be us within the next 8 years, or it might be someone that's in our team or that we manage or whatever. And remembering that so many of those disabilities and chronic illnesses are not visible. So you might have people in your teams who are managing those conditions at the moment, and you don't know about them because they're not visible. So that one always strikes me. And the other bit for me, just hearing you and your mum, you compare yourself and your mum, so you've both got the same condition, but actually it presents so differently and you need such different things in terms of workplace support. So I think that really drives it home, doesn't it? This is about an individual conversation with an individual. You can't make those kind of sweeping generalizations. So yeah, loads to take from that. Thank you. We've got a couple of questions in the chat and a few minutes left to go. We're going through till 12. So if anyone else has got any questions, you can type those into the Q&A function and we will get through as many as we can. Sam, just to come back to that one from Charles earlier. So I think this is quite a specific situation potentially, but in general, I think linking back to your point about educating a manager about what a disability or a chronic illness looks like for that particular person, and if training has been recommended and that manager or people within the team haven't taken it up, what would you suggest next if the manager doesn't feel like they're maybe taking as much interest as the individual might like?
I think to maybe go to occupational health and discuss it with them and see if they can help with any adjustments if their manager's not going to kind of help with that. Having these things like the purple passports in place so that it's kind of like on record, and then it doesn't really need their kind of input then. But maybe kind of if your condition or disability does have a charity website and they have anything on there that you could like simply drop into their email or put on their desk kind of thing, that would be another option, I guess. I think sometimes you just need to keep knocking on that door until someone listens. And I did have this with my last manager. We're really close friends now, but it wasn't until I opened up to him and said, like, this is what's happening with my life. Like, I don't want to be this ill, but this is the situation. And then he actually opened up to me that his wife also has stuff going on and she doesn't work. And I was like, okay, your wife doesn't have to work. I have to work. I need to make a living. And then we just kind of, it was just that one conversation that we had, and it just, I don't know, it was like fireworks going off. It was like we finally understood each other. And honestly, that took months and months and months of me feeling, I nearly left that role so many times because of what was going, like how I felt that he didn't understand me. But yeah, I just kept trying to make him see what it was like. And sometimes it was an informal chat that we were having at the time, and it really helped.
Great, thank you. Brilliant, thank you. And just to say, Rachel has just added in, not a question, but just to say, really helpful from a manager's perspective, all that you've talked through today. So we've got another question here. Would you be able to signpost support for someone who is a registered nurse working in paediatrics with multiple sclerosis? They've left work but now wanting to return to practice. Is there somewhere you could suggest she could contact for advice to see if this is feasible? Again, quite a specific one, but I don't know if you've got any advice on that one, Sam.
So she's not currently working at the minute?
Yeah, sounds like she's left work, or they've left work, and yeah, wanting to return to work.
I think if she can kind of get an interview and then discuss that with HR about how they could support her, or is she thinking about going to a different job altogether? If they want to pass on my details, I'd be more than happy to talk to them or signpost them in the right direction, kind of depending on what it is that they're looking for. I know there are charities and things out there as well that do support people with chronic illness and disability getting back into work. It depends how much this condition kind of affects her, and if she wants to get back into the same type of work, then she can apply the normal way of doing that and then ask for reasonable adjustments. Or if she needs a different type of work and needs further support, then I think that would be a different way of doing it. Would be for a charity or something, maybe.
Great, thank you. Hopefully that's helpful to the person who's asked the question. So opportunity to get in touch with yourself, Sam, and with us in the equality team as well, if that's helpful. Just realised I didn't even introduce myself. So for those who don't know me and don't know why I'm here and who I am, my name is Katrina. I work as part of the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion team and support our Purple network, which Glyn is the co-chair of. So yeah, just here helping facilitate the Q&A today. So you can contact us on equality@adambrooks.nhs.uk as well, and we'll see what we can do to support you. So thank you. Next question, Sam. I hadn't realised you had to disclose in order to be covered. Is that just for us on ESR, which is our electronic staff record in the NHS, Purple Passport, or do we need to also have the open conversation with our manager? So what counts as disclosing as far as the Equality Act is concerned?
So I'd say, so if it was on your Purple Passport, I assume your manager would know then anyway, wouldn't they? Yeah,
so Purple Passport would normally be about opening up that conversation with your manager rather than just being completed in isolation. So yeah, that should have a conversation involved with it.
I think as long as everyone knows, then you're covered. But having something like the Purple Passport, should you need to prove that you disclosed it, is obviously a great thing to have, isn't it? Hopefully you'll never have to kind of prove that. But having something, yeah, I would say the Purple Passport, as long as your manager knows about that and kind of that is a conversation as well. That's probably more than you need. Yeah. It's better than what most people would have anyway, because actually thinking about it, what proof do we have if we only just say it in a conversation? So having this Purple Passport is also a great thing for that, because it's on paper, isn't it?
Yeah, great, thank you. I think I'm just thinking through about whether so people can change their own information on ESR, our electronic staff record. The Equality Act does say your manager has to reasonably be expected to know, or words to that effect, doesn't it? So they might not know that you've updated your ESR record. So I think always worth having that conversation with your manager, just to make them aware. You might not need any adjustments, but it might just be worth saying, actually, just to let you know, this is happening. I don't need you to do anything, but just wanted you to be aware, or whatever. But obviously your manager can only provide support once they know about what's going on for you. So definitely would encourage that conversation if you feel comfortable to do so.
Yeah, like for example, my mom, actually, she doesn't really need anything in place anymore. Her stoma gave her like her life back almost. So they know she's got a stoma, because if something was to happen while she was at work, they need to know why she's running out of, she works in a school, why she was running out of the classroom. But she disclosed it not because she was asking for something, just because they know now, don't they? And they know what she's dealing with. I actually think that sometimes she needs time off, and when she is poorly, but she refuses it. And so you can just tell them in a conversation, and I'm sure that having this on record would just support you even more.
Yeah, and sometimes just your manager being aware that that is another part of your life that you're managing is helpful. So they might not need to do anything differently, but they're just conscious that you're also managing a health condition or a chronic illness alongside doing your job and the rest of life that we've all got, isn't it? So,
and with how common chronic illness and disability is, like how many people are disabled or do have a chronic illness, chances are that your manager's going to know someone close to them that's got a chronic illness or disability. And I think that's where the understanding is better, once you can kind of find that common ground.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone else just saying, really good idea about sharing charity organisations and websites that support that particular condition. So really great source of information to signpost people to if you're wanting to share a bit more about what that condition or illness looks like for you.
And actually that's a really great way as well of, so when I hadn't told the whole team about my Crohn's disease, my manager knew. I organised this bake sale for Crohn's and colitis. It was in my first year of working for them. And actually I had people from across the organisation come to buy cakes from our little department. And they were like, oh, my son's got Crohn's disease, or I've got a friend that's got Crohn's disease. Like, and it just opened that conversation then. And instead of me having to like have this kind of awkward, formal conversation with the team, like, look, I've got this horrible illness, it was actually just like, yeah, I've got Crohn's disease, buy a cake. And it just like made it feel a lot lighter hearted, rather than having to have that kind of conversation that's sometimes quite hard to have.
And it normalizes it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because it just becomes part of the conversation, rather than having to make it a massive deal that you're announcing something. Yeah, absolutely. Probably got time. We've got one more question in the Q&A, maybe time for one more if someone can type it quickly, and then we'll wrap up. So Sam, do you get tired of saying another bad day or I feel poorly again if it happens quite a lot in a short period of time?
Yeah, and actually if you could have seen me last night, I was crying to my partner, saying that I feel like a burden, because we've got a little boy that's 2, and I just feel like something's had to give this week, and I've not been able to pull my weight as much with him because I've had to focus on work and just the many hospital appointments that I've had, and it is okay to feel like that and to feel a bit fed up. And I was having one of those days, why me kind of days, and I think that's okay. And I think something that my partner always says to me is that we don't choose to be ill. It's out of our control. So yes, you are having another bad day, but at the same time you're showing up to work, you're doing your best, and that's all you can do, isn't it? You can only try. And it would be easy just to give up at times and think, you know what, I can't deal with work on top of everything else going on, but you just got to keep going.
Yeah, great, thank you. Good. I think that is all of the questions, which is perfect timing, really. Sam, thank you so much.
No, you're welcome.
I will just hand back to Glyn to close the session, if that's okay.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you to Sam for sharing this with us today, and if it can be viewed on the Facebook CUH staff group, if anybody would like to go through it again later or share it with anybody else. And I'd just like to say, if anybody is interested in joining us in the Purple Network, of course they can be contacted on the Connect pages or through the EDI team and Katrina. And I think that's a wrap. Is that okay? Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.